No one could save the warship until a human mechanic cleared its parasites. Stars sparkled around it like distant diamonds, but inside the warship there was no sparkle, no life, only the steady hum of failing systems. The ship's AI, Athena, was repeating error messages in a calm, mechanical voice that betrayed nothing but failure. Critical system failure. Parasite activity at 98%. Core breach imminent. It announced for what seemed like the 100th time. A group of alien engineers floated through the maintenance tunnels, their sleek, multi-limbed forms darting past warning lights and sparks. They checked monitors and whispered to each other in a language of clicks and tones. None of them dared touch the central console. They had tried everything: chemical purges, energy pulses, biosuppressors. Nothing worked. "They cannot be stopped," one of the engineers said, its voice trembling. "The parasites adapt faster than our technology." On the bridge, a conference of fleet officers watched in silence. The mood was tense. Fear hung in the air heavier than the vacuum outside. Captain Yelrin, the commanding officer of the Vanguard, rubbed his elongated temples. "Then we've lost her," he said quietly. "No one can save her." That was when Mara Kane walked into the room. Humans were rare in this sector of space, considered reckless and primitive by most advanced species. Mara was young, barely 29, with grease-stained overalls and short-cropped hair. Her eyes, sharp and bright, scanned the consoles and blinking lights with ease. She didn't need gadgets or AI protocols to see what was wrong. She had an instinct for machines that no algorithm could match. The alien officers turned to her with skepticism. One of them, a tall creature with four-jointed arms and metallic skin, hissed in disbelief. "A human, you cannot comprehend the complexity of this infestation. You will only make it worse." Mara smiled faintly. "I'll take my chances." Captain Yelrin glanced at her. "We don't have much choice. If you can't stop it, the Vanguard is lost, and so is the fleet." Mara nodded and floated down the maintenance corridors, tools clutched in her hands. The ship's corridors were narrow, lit by flickering emergency lights. Every panel she passed showed strange distortions, flickering screens, wires pulsing with green, alien energy. The parasites had embedded themselves deep in the ship systems, spreading like living malware. As she entered the engine room, the smell of burning circuits and ozone hit her. Sparks flew from broken conduits. The hum of the ship was erratic now, almost like it was struggling to breathe. Mara knelt beside a damaged console and pulled out her multi-tool, examining the corrupted circuits. "These aren't ordinary parasites," she muttered. "They react to digital signals, but not like viruses. They behave like living predators inside the machine." She carefully inserted a probe into the console, sending a low-frequency pulse. The parasite reacted instantly, retreating from the signal before advancing again. Mara's eyes widened. "So they can feel me," she said to herself. "They can sense intent." This was new. Even the AI, advanced beyond anything humans had designed, couldn't fully predict their behavior. Mara realized immediately why all the alien engineers had failed. Their approach was purely mechanical, purely logical. But these parasites were alive. They had instinct. They adapted, they could sense fear. And only a human, improvisational, instinct-driven, unpredictable had a chance. The ship shuddered violently, throwing her against the wall. Warning lights flashed red. "Warning! Parasite surge detected in core systems." "Critical failure imminent," Athena announced. Mara gritted her teeth. She pulled herself to her feet and ran toward the central neural core, the heart of the ship. It was a vast cylindrical chamber, wires and conduits twisting like veins through the walls. The parasites were already moving along them, tiny and fast, glowing faintly green. They pulsed like living machines, attacking the ship's intelligence at every turn. She pressed her hand to the wall, feeling the vibrations of the ship. Her mind raced. The AI was too slow to adapt to the parasite's movement. the alien engineers too methodical. But a human could think differently. A human could see patterns where there were none. Mara set up her makeshift diagnostic rig, a tangle of wires, probes, and small devices that looked primitive compared to the ship's advanced technology, but they worked with human instinct. She sent a signal through the conduits, observing how the parasites reacted. They recoiled, then regrouped, forming clusters she had never seen before. She spoke aloud as if the parasites could hear her. "You think you're clever, but you haven't met me yet." Hours passed as Mara worked. She crawled through maintenance tunnels, climbing into vents where the parasites had nested. Her hands were scraped, her overalls torn. Every system she touched resisted, every parasite reacted violently. Sparks flew and alarms blared. At one point, she paused to catch her breath and observe the parasites' behavior. They moved in swarms, but there were weak points, zones where their patterns overlapped and caused confusion. That was her key. She could exploit that. Carefully, she adjusted her rig, sending conflicting signals into the neural network. The parasites hesitated. One by one, small clusters detached and floated harmlessly into the vents. She smiled. "There we go, follow the pattern." Suddenly, the floor shook violently. The ship groaned as though it were alive. Mara stumbled into the wall, narrowly avoiding a falling conduit. Athena's voice echoed, calm but urgent. "Critical parasite surge. Core breach imminent. Estimated time to failure 20 minutes." Mara's heart raced. She had only one chance. She would have to interface directly with the neural core herself. The risk was enormous. If she failed, she could be trapped inside the ship's systems, her consciousness lost in the parasite's network. But she had no choice. The ship needed her. She floated into the central chamber, her rig clutched tightly. The core glowed faintly, pulsating as the parasites swarmed. She activated the interface and placed her hand on the neural panel. For a moment, everything went still. Then the parasites surged toward her signal, swarming with violent intent. Mara breathed deeply, focusing on the patterns. She didn't just follow the signals. She improvised, adjusted, predicted. She thought like a mechanic and moved like a human instinctively. The parasites reacted to her unpredictability. Confused, they began breaking apart, retreating from the neural core. Minutes passed like hours. The ship trembled and groaned under the strain, but Mara held her position. Her arms ached. Her breath came in short gasps. But she noticed something extraordinary. The ship itself seemed to respond to her. Systems that had been offline flickered to life. Lights returned. Consoles blinked in proper sequence. Then the worst happened. A massive parasite cluster, larger than any she had seen, surged toward the engine core. Mara's stomach dropped. If it reached the engine, the vanguard would be lost forever. She tightened her grip and focused all her energy on predicting its movements. Her instincts guided her. She sent the countersignal through her rig, not precisely calculated but perfectly timed. The cluster hesitated, confused by her human unpredictability. With a final push, she directed it away from the core and into a containment vent. Silence. The ship floated quietly, almost peacefully. Mara slumped to the floor, exhausted, covered in sweat and grime. Athena's voice, calm for the first time in hours, spoke. "Parasite activity neutralized. Systems stabilizing. Human intervention successful." Mara smiled faintly, wiping her forehead. She had done it. She had saved a warship that no one else could save. The aliens, watching from the corridor, stared in disbelief. Even Captain Yelrin seemed stunned, his usual calm authority broken by awe. You actually did it," he said. Mara simply shrugged. "Sometimes all you need is a human touch." As she floated toward the maintenance exit, she glanced at the stars outside. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of enemies and parasites that could destroy entire fleets. But in this moment, she had proven one undeniable truth. When the odds were impossible, a human mind and human instinct could make the difference between life and death. And that was a power no alien or machine could ever fully predict. The Vanguard had survived the first attack, but Mara Kane knew the danger was far from over. The parasite infestation had been weakened, yes, but nowhere near destroyed. The ship systems were stabilizing, but the AI, Athena, continued to issue warnings. Parasite residual activity detected in auxiliary engines. Probability of resurgence, 65%. Mara floated through the maintenance tunnels again, clutching her improvised diagnostic rig. Every panel she passed still flickered with erratic signals. Sparks flew from exposed conduits, and a faint green glow, the parasite's signature, pulsed intermittently across the walls. The alien engineers had retreated to a safe section of the ship. Their multi-limbed forms hovered in the observation bay, whispering anxious calculations to each other. Mara didn't need their advice. Humans were different. Humans could improvise. And that improvisation would be the key to saving the Vanguard. She examined the engine core. The parasites were clever. They didn't just attack systems, they adapted. When she sent a signal in one direction, they shifted elsewhere. When she blocked one corridor, they found another. It was a living, intelligent enemy, unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Mara pressed her forehead to the metal wall. She could almost feel the ship's heartbeat beneath her hand. The Vanguard was alive and it wanted to survive. "All right," she muttered to herself. "We do this my way." Her plan was risky. She would create what she called a neural decoy, a signal strong enough to lure the parasites into controlled zones, then trap them and eliminate them entirely. The alien engineers had tried similar strategies, but theirs were mechanical and predictable. Mara's approach relied on improvisation. It relied on unpredictability. She began assembling the decoy from parts scavenged from old maintenance robots and emergency systems. Wires twisted together, small probes blinked, and a hum of low-frequency energy filled the corridor. Mara adjusted the signal, testing it against a small parasite cluster. It worked. The parasites reacted immediately, moving toward the decoy. Mara grinned. This was the first real victory since the infestation began, but her triumph was short-lived. A sudden shudder ran through the ship. Lights flickered violently. Athena's calm voice became urgent. "Warning, parasite cluster approaching engine core. Critical breach in 5 minutes." Mara's heart raced. She grabbed her rig and darted into the main engine tunnel. The air well, what passed for air inside the pressurized sections of the ship, was thick with tension. Sparks and debris fell around her. The parasites had grown bolder, attacking in large swarms now. She reached the engine core just in time to see a massive cluster of parasites swarming along the conduits. Their green glow pulsed with menace, reflecting off the polished metal walls. Mara took a deep breath and activated the decoy. The parasites hesitated. They were drawn to the signal but suspicious of its erratic pattern. Mara smiled. Humans could do what machines could not. They could think unpredictably. They could improvise, change patterns at a moment's notice, and exploit instinct. She adjusted the frequency of the decoy in real time, guiding the parasites toward containment zones she had created in adjacent maintenance shafts. Sparks flew as the parasites collided with energy barriers. Some dissolved. Others struggled but were trapped. Mara's hands were slick with sweat as she worked tirelessly, adjusting signals and redirecting swarms. Hours passed. She moved from one section of the engine to another, her rig humming and glowing with the combined energy of human improvisation and alien technology. The ship groaned around her, the vibrations reminding her that every second counted. Then came the worst part. The parasites were learning. The massive cluster she had been guiding toward containment suddenly broke formation and surged back toward the engine core. Mara's stomach sank. If the core failed, the entire Vanguard would be lost. "Not today," she muttered. She dove into the maintenance crawlways, laying improvised signal nodes along the walls and floors. The nodes pulsed with energy, luring the parasites into a labyrinthine trap. Mara crawled through vents, ducked under broken conduits, and adjusted signals with one hand while clutching her rig with the other. The parasites reacted violently. Some tried to escape through the ship systems, causing sparks and minor explosions. Mara barely avoided being caught in one surge, her overalls torn and hands scraped. The alien engineers' calculations would have failed here. They lacked human intuition, the gut-level understanding of a living system. Mara could almost see the pattern now. The parasites moved like a swarm of living code, constantly adapting. But there were weak points, zones where their own instincts conflicted with each other. She exploited those weaknesses, sending conflicting signals to confuse them. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat dripped from her face. Sparks from broken conduits scorched her arms. The smell of burnt circuits filled the air. And yet, step by step, she advanced, guiding the parasites toward the containment zones. Finally, she reached the engine core itself. The massive parasite cluster hovered near the main conduits, ready to breach. Mara took a deep breath and activated her final signal, an analog countervirus she had improvised from old human tech. It wasn't perfect, but it was unpredictable, just like her. The cluster surged, hesitated, then disintegrated into harmless fragments. The engine core hummed with renewed energy. Mara slumped against the wall, exhausted but triumphant. Athena's voice was calm again, almost reverent. Parasite threat neutralized. Engine core stable. Human intervention successful. Mara allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had done what no alien engineer or AI could. She had used her instincts, her intuition, her creativity, everything that made humans unique, to save the vanguard. The alien engineers floated into the engine room, eyes wide in disbelief. One of them whispered, we could not have imagined this." Mara wiped her hands on her overalls. "Sometimes you have to think like a living system, not just a machine," she said. Captain Yelrin arrived shortly after, his usual calm demeanor tinged with awe. "Mara, you've done the impossible. The fleet owes you a debt it may never fully repay." Mara shook her head. "The ship did most of the work. I just gave it a human touch." But even as she spoke, she knew the danger wasn't over. The parasites were clever, adaptable, and possibly still alive in hidden sections of the ship. They could return at any time, and if they did, the vanguard could be lost again. She floated through the corridors, checking each system carefully. Her rig hummed softly as it scanned for residual activity. Tiny flickers of green remained in obscure conduits, traces of the parasites. Mara frowned. "They're hiding, waiting, observing." Her instincts screamed that this was not the final battle. The vanguard had survived, but only because she had acted when no one else could. If the parasites learned from this encounter, they would return stronger, smarter, deadlier. She glanced out at the stars beyond the ship's viewport. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers humans could barely imagine. And yet, despite the fear, she felt a spark of pride. Humanity was small, fragile, often underestimated. But ingenuity, instinct, and courage could make a difference. Mara floated back to the engine room console, already planning the next step. She would need to monitor every system, reinforce containment zones, and perhaps modify her countervirus to adapt to new parasite strategies. Athena's voice broke her thoughts. "Warning! Unidentified signal detected. Probability of new parasite activity, 40%. Mara's eyes narrowed. She grinned. "Looks like we've got company. Time to see what humans can really do." And with that, she dove back into the heart of the ship, where danger waited in every shadowed vent and every flickering panel. The vanguard was still alive, but the war was far from over. Mara's ingenuity had saved it once, but she knew that only humans, unpredictable and resourceful, could protect it again. The corridor lights flickered as she moved, and somewhere deep in the ship, the parasites stirred, sensing a new threat. This time, they would not underestimate the human mechanic. The Vanguard had survived 2 attacks, but Mara Kane knew the parasites were far from defeated. Their presence was subtle now, hidden in the ship's deep systems. Yet every flicker of a green pulse on a panel reminded her that the enemy was still alive, watching and waiting. Athena's voice echoed through the ship's corridors. Unidentified signal detected. Probability of new parasite cluster emergence, 60%. Mara clenched her fists. She floated through the maintenance tunnels, her rig humming softly in her hands. She had spent the last few hours reinforcing containment zones and scanning every conduit, but intuition told her that the parasites were learning. They had adapted to her signals, predicting her moves in ways they hadn't before. This would be the final test. The Vanguard groaned as it adjusted course in orbit around a nearby asteroid field. The fleet outside waited anxiously, watching for the flagship's response. If the Vanguard failed, the fleet could collapse under the alien onslaught. Humanity's fate and the Alliance's rested on Mara's shoulders. She reached the engine core, the heart of the ship, and floated into the central chamber. The lights flickered, shadows dancing along the polished metal walls. A faint green glow pulsed from the conduits. Parasite clusters were emerging again. But this time they were larger, more coordinated. They were clearly adapting, forming defensive shapes, anticipating her moves. Mara exhaled deeply. This was no longer just a test of technology. It was a battle of wits. She activated her rig and began sending her improvised signals. The parasites hesitated, circling the core in confused patterns. Mara's plan was simple: force the parasites to divide into smaller clusters, then eliminate them individually. But the execution required perfect timing, instinct, and flexibility, human qualities no AI could replicate. Her hands moved with precision, adjusting frequencies, rerouting energy, and creating feedback loops. Sparks flew around her as the parasites attacked with renewed aggression. Some latched onto conduits, trying to override systems. Others surged toward the neural core itself. Mara gritted her teeth and dove into the chaos. She maneuvered through the vents and maintenance shafts, manually guiding the parasites toward containment fields she had set up. Her rig pulsed with light, sending counter-signals into the network. The ship trembled and alarms blared, but she remained focused. "Come on, think, move, adapt," she muttered. Her voice echoed off the metal walls. The parasites swarmed like living code, reacting to every adjustment she made. But Mara had an advantage: unpredictability. She wasn't following a program. She was improvising in real time. She shifted patterns, reversed signals, and introduced random fluctuations that confused the parasites. One by one, clusters began breaking apart, retreating into containment zones. Suddenly, a massive cluster surged directly at the engine core, larger than anything she had faced before. Mara's stomach dropped. If it reached the core, the Vanguard would be destroyed and the fleet along with it. "No, not today," she said, her voice firm. She activated her final tool, an analog countervirus she had built from old human tech. Unlike digital systems, it could interact with the parasites in unpredictable ways. She deployed it directly into the conduit network, weaving it through the cluster's path. The parasites hesitated, then struggled against the virus. Green pulses flickered erratically, and she saw some fragments dissolve completely. Mara floated closer to the core, using her rig to guide the last of the cluster into containment. Her arms ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, and sweat dripped into her eyes. But step by step she succeeded. The engine core surged to life, humming smoothly for the first time in hours. Lights returned to the corridors. Systems stabilized. Athena's voice sounded calm, almost relieved. Parasite threat neutralized. Engine core operational. Human intervention decisive. Mara sank to the floor, exhausted but triumphant. She had done it. She had faced a parasite swarm no one else could confront, and had won through ingenuity, instinct, and courage. Alien engineers floated into the chamber, wide-eyed and speechless. The leader, a multi-limbed creature whose metallic skin reflected the core's glow, whispered, "Incredible, the human saved the ship." Mara wiped her hands on her overalls. "Not just me," she said. "The ship helped too. You just need to listen." Captain Yelrin arrived, his usual composed demeanor replaced by awe. "Mara, you've done more than save the Vanguard. You've shown the fleet that humans can make the impossible possible." Mara smiled faintly. "Sometimes, all you need is a human mind and human instinct." But even as she spoke, she knew that the victory was more than technical. It was symbolic. The Vanguard had been a ship written off as lost, infected by alien parasites that no one else could defeat. And yet, humanity had found a way. Humans were small, fragile, underestimated, but capable of creativity, courage, and resilience that no AI or alien mind could predict. She floated toward the observation bay, looking at the stars beyond the viewport. The fleet had rallied, encouraged by the flagship's survival. Other human engineers and soldiers were now being considered for missions where intuition and improvisation were crucial. Mara knew this was just the beginning. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had changed forever, yet she remained humble. She had faced death, danger, and overwhelming odds, and survived not because of superior technology but because of human qualities: ingenuity, instinct, courage, adaptability, traits that no AI or alien system could fully replicate. Athena's voice broke her thoughts again, calm and mechanical. "Warning, minor residual activity detected, probability of resurgence, negligible." Mara shook her head with a small laugh. "Negligible enough." She turned toward the central neural core. Every panel was lit, every system stabilized. For the first time in days, the Vanguard seemed alive in a healthy, predictable way, a living ship saved by human hands. She looked at her rig, now humming softly. It had been an extension of her mind, her instincts, and her determination. Without it, she might have failed. But more importantly, without her willingness to improvise, to risk everything, the ship would have been lost. Hours later, the Vanguard was fully operational. Mara floated on the bridge, exhausted but alert. The alien engineers, who had doubted her abilities at every turn, now observed quietly, some taking notes on her methods. They would study humans for years, trying to understand the unique combination of instinct and creativity that had saved the ship. Captain Yelrin approached, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've given us hope," he said. "Not just for this ship, but for humanity in the fleet. The Alliance may face many enemies, but with humans like you, we can face them all." Mara smiled faintly, thinking about the battles yet to come. "Hope and a little unpredictability," she said. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and enemies humans could barely imagine. But Mara knew one undeniable truth: humans, with their minds and instincts, could rise above any challenge. The Vanguard had been saved, not by advanced technology or perfect algorithms, but by a human mechanic who refused to give up, who trusted her instincts, and who improvised when the odds were impossible. And that was humanity, fragile, underestimated, yet capable of brilliance that no alien or AI could match. As Mara floated through the ship, checking the final systems, she felt a sense of pride. She had proven that even in the darkest moments, humans could find solutions others couldn't, that they could turn hopeless situations into triumphs, and that ingenuity was more powerful than brute force. The parasites were gone for now. The Vanguard was alive. And humanity had shown the galaxy that it was a force to be reckoned with. For Mara Kane, the warship mechanic, it was a victory she would never forget. She had faced the impossible and she had won, not because she was the strongest or the fastest, but because she was human. And sometimes, being human was more than enough.